Now, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't just cover watches that fit me on this channel, because as you can imagine, you tend to naturally be more interested in watches that do fit you, but I also need to understand that not everyone has a tiny little wrist like mine. So when Sternglass emailed me about this new release that they've got here, it immediately piqued my interest, because Sternglass are a brand that have had a few popular models in the watch community, but most of which have been sub 40 millimeters. I think the most popular model, the Naos, that one was about 38mm, and that was pretty good if you had a smaller arm, but what if you didn't? What if you wanted a minimalist watch that was that bit bigger? There hasn't really been a great deal of options, at least not good made options. We've always had the likes of MVMT making gigantic minimalist watches. They really were bottom of the barrel stuff, which it's never really been the case with Sternglass. They kind of bridge that gap a bit between enthusiast and fashion watch. What we've got here is a new version of their Hamburg, which we'll look at in a second. Now, this isn't a watch that I'd actually looked at before. This new one is like a limited edition version, but I asked if they could send over the regular version just to compare against. And online, at least, I couldn't help but think that maybe this standard version was slightly better looking. Now, you'll find a link to both of these watches in the video description. Thanks to Sternglass for sending over both of these review samples, by the way. Now, admittedly, they are never going to provide the Chinese rivaling bang for the buck or anything. That's just what happens when you got staff based in Germany like this. But these watches are pretty distinctive. They do have that Bauhaus vibe, and I've always thought Sternglass watches are very good looking. Say what you want about the specifications, but you really struggle to get a look like this outside of the likes of Junghans, let's say, whose watches are, well, way more expensive than even this. Just really, really nice dial proportions there and lovely chapter rings. And it does look quite a bit like the popular Naos watch that they released a while back, albeit that one was 38mm, whereas this one is 42. And it certainly has some similarities with the likes of the Junghans Max Bill, doesn't it? By no means a one-to-one copy, but it's similarly stylish and also very, very thin. We'll get the calipers on this in a moment. And yeah, outside of the likes of Junghans, there really aren't many other brands making watches that look like this these days. So yeah, we've got a 316L stainless steel case. Says here on the listing 6mm excluding the crystal, and yeah, definitely believe them, as you can see. Almost as thin as the strap it sits on. It's got a double domed sapphire crystal, up to 5 ATM water resistance, they're saying, and it's got an engraved case back, I'm assuming with a map there of Hamburg, potentially. It is a port city, of course, and it certainly looks like that. Quad screwed rear there. Ships on a pretty good strap again. Sternglass straps tend to be pretty decent across the board. This one is no exception. Also has quick release tabs, which is nice. Very, very clear sapphire crystal there as well. Definitely had some muddy ones recently, but this isn't one of them. Really nice and legible on this colour at least. And this configuration is currently available for £239 on the Sternglass site, which I think is really the only qualm people will probably have with this. 239 is more than I think a lot of people are willing to spend on a quartz watch. Although I will say I do think people are maybe forgetting how much the likes of Junghans watches cost these days, because they are... even the quartz ones, you're looking minimum 600 quid at the time of recording this at least. But yeah, it is very attractive from square on. Let's get those measurements, eh? That one is 42mm there, exactly across on the width. Now, even though it's 42mm, lug to lug, as you can see, it's going to be pretty short there. Very stubby little lugs, which is what you'll often find on these Bauhaus watches. Or Bauhaus inspired, should I say. 44.9mm lug to lug. If I include the crystal in this thickness, it's still only just over 9mm. Does look like their 6mm reading is about accurate if you were to exclude that. Now here's a look at it on my 6¼ inch wrist. Well, you can tell that this watch isn't really made for me. Definitely with such a wide dial and then no bezel. It certainly wears like a 42mm watch, maybe even a little bit bigger, and that's even with that really short lug to lug. And then still nice and slim. Now I suspect outside of the 38mm Naos, this is probably the next best selling watch from Sternglass, because it gives a similar vibe like this that you could realistically wear with a lot of stuff, but in a larger package. And that larger package also extends to the strap, by the way. You can see here that it's definitely too big for my skinny 6 1/4 inch wrist, and that's despite having a fairly large number of holes there. So definitely worth sticking to if you've got only an average or larger size arm, I'd say. So 7+ inches probably. So yeah, that's the standard one, and I couldn't help but look at it as well because it just looks so different than this new limited edition one. Almost looks like a different watch entirely, as you'll see. And they're calling this one the 1911 edition. It's quite apparent why. I mean, the colour scheme is certainly inspired by that sort of era. And yeah, I mean, the watches, they really do almost look like completely different watches when they're side by side. Now, this one on the left is a tiny bit more expensive. I think at the time of recording this, it's still within like an early buyer window, basically. Yeah, launch offer. So it's $259, but it's supposed to normally be $279. And while I can't see any numbers here as to how many units are available, I'm fairly sure this is limited edition to some degree. Or at least that's what their emails indicated. And I have to say, this actually looks better in person than I thought again. Now, the movements in both of these watches, by the way, is the Miyota GR12. So I've probably covered that at some point before. Just a kind of run-of-the-mill quartz, really. Is very quiet at the very least. And they've gone with that movement because it's pretty skinny from the looks of it. They're saying here it's only 3.5 millimeters, which would make sense. And then this version, as you can see here, also has slightly different, arguably tiny bit nicer looking case back, supposed to represent the Elba Tunnel, it says here on the webpage. And this one's also got a framed date wheel there, whereas the other one has got just like a standard opened one. But I'd say that's probably the right choice for each of them, actually. Not sure this one on the right would look right with a framed date wheel. We'll also give them a lume test at the end because they may have different coloured lume. And here's a look at the limited edition one on wrist. Certainly a much more colourful option than the other one. Not sure that this combo would see a great deal of usage with my wardrobe, admittedly. I would typically opt for the more subtle designs like this. I just find them more versatile for me. And I think the gold accents are also something that you're either going to love or hate with this one. Of course, the case is silver, whereas those are a different colour, which is definitely unconventional. Yeah, it does look like we've got two different compounds here, certainly two different colours. And after a few seconds, I certainly think that the standard version has got brighter luminescence, especially on the hands there. Definitely a brighter green, especially on the minute hand. And then the lume on the pips is about equal across both. So it's good to see that they've got, colour matched lume on the left. But it's a definite shame that they haven't maintained the brightness from the original model, whose performance is about average, I'd say, for a watch at this price. So there's your first look at the new Hamburg 1911, as well as the standard Hamburg from Stern Glass watches. They're both links down below in the video description. I mean, the blue colour is nice, but yeah, I just feel like I'd be wearing something sleeker, more like this, much more often. I can't help but think that these would definitely sell better if they were under 200 as well. I don't expect them to ever compete with, wholly Chinese brands, but I think at that sort of price they would definitely be much more highly recommended online because they're not bad watches. No, it's not poorly constructed by any stretch. Good strap, fairly decent case, definitely good crystal as well, and good looks, but I do think that quartz at that price will be a barrier for some.